Is the microphone coming on? Wonderful. Because if it wouldn't have worked, I'm German, I just shout at you and you'll understand anyway. Yeah, so we're going to talk about VR, and the question then is usually, so what are you doing with VR? Like, how do you do web and VR together? Well, the answer to that is that I work at a small company from Zurich called Archaeologic, and I lead the engineering team there, which means basically I get to do all the nasty bits, and hopefully everyone else gets to do the fun bits. And we built this wonderful browser. This is in a browser. This is not like an app or something. This is on your browser, and you can do like all sorts of camera tours. You can change the furniture, and you can like literally build and modify the architecture that you're seeing there. And you can also have, there's like this tiny icon here that's not very good to see right now. That is a cardboard icon, and you can actually walk through these buildings as well. You can try it out if you have a floor plan. Just upload that floor plan, and you get a free 3D model out of it. The URL is going to be there later. Whatever. I also do like a bunch of things for the community. So I am on GitHub very active. I help with the W3C specifications, and I write things on the email lists there as well. I'm also a Google developer expert for Polymer and web technologies in general, and I have been contributing to Mozilla, as you might have noticed. Anyhow, let's start with a little disclaimer, because this is Angular Camp, and a few people have asked me like, so, oh my God, so you're coming to Angular Camp, so you're doing something with WebVR and Angular? And I'm like, maybe, I don't know, I will try, I guess. And the thing is, I kind of feel like a fraud now, because we have seen all these amazing talks so far, and they are really deep into the matter, and I'm like, right? Mind blown. I mean, give a round of applause to the speakers so far. I mean, that's really awesome. And the organizers and the volunteers, right? This is not just the speakers. This is you and the volunteers and the organizers. Really cool crowd. But maybe if you're expecting like super deep Angular things right now, have a cup of coffee, I don't know, get some ice cream or some sleep or whatever you do when you're having a talk that is not Angular at an Angular conference. So yeah, I'm dropping the level a bit. I'm sorry for that. But I love JavaScript, and I think the lessons you might learn here, or the inspiration you might get from this, hopefully will take you further, and then you can integrate it with Angular. So that's not a problem. What you learn today, or what you see today, you can do with Angular as well. It's just that I did Angular 1.2, and then I'm like, I'm going to do Angular 4. That's not going to be, no. It's a very different thing, so yeah, that didn't quite happen. Okay, so, okay, great. Now I have that out of the way. I'm a fraud. Check. Besides, why do we even care? Like, why VR? Yeah, that's a hype thing. It is overhyped, by the way, but there is a thing to it that is actually not a hype, but a real amazing thing. So why would you care about VR? Well, first things first, you can do a lot of things in VR that you simply can't do in reality. And that's really cool, because you get to choose the constraints that you're working with. So this is Tilt Brush. And Tilt Brush allows you to paint, to take a paintbrush, which is a controller in your hand, and just start painting in 3D space. And with materials that you usually do not paint with, like fire, you might be able to do that once in your house. In VR, you can do it as often as you wish. You can also paint with music. You can also do that if you're on acid, but I do not recommend that necessarily. Kids, do not try this at home. Try that at home. So that's one thing that you can do. You can create things. You can build things very naturally, because we are a three-dimensional being in a three-dimensional world. Maybe we're in a three-dimensional being in a nine-dimensional world. Who cares? We see the 3 dimensions, and we can walk around them and build things in VR without having the actual physical constraints, which is really cool. You can also basically experience things that you can't really experience in the real world. I mean, you can do this. I'd rather not. I'm very afraid of heights, which also means that in VR, this is kind of scaring me as well, but that's a different story. But it's pretty cool, because you can like zoom into the world anywhere, and then you can do like the Spider-Man thing and just like fly through Manhattan or Tokyo in this case. And you can experience things that you can't experience. And there's a very personal story in this for me, as I have a relative with social anxiety. Social anxiety means that this person, my relative, can't really deal with being outside and in unknown contexts. So if there's like people that they don't know, it's not just uncomfortable, it is frightening. It's an anxiety. It's not a rational fear, it's an anxiety, and it's a disorder in that sense, but it can be cured, but it's tricky and it takes long. And so basically, if I would like to take him throughout the world, and he would love to travel the world, but all he has is the window, the little magical window of a screen, of a computer screen, the internet and the television to actually travel the world. This is a very limiting experience. But with VR, he gets to experience places that he could never comfortably experience in the real world. That's really cool. Also, that means that you can, for instance, use a VR tool to have school kids travel to ancient Rome, which is also really cool because time travel is pretty expensive these days. Also, I've been told by my future me. Anyway, so yeah, that's another thing that you can do with VR. And the cool thing about this is that the interface is really intuitive because you just walk somewhere, or you point at a thing, and you touch a thing, grab a thing. It's a really direct interaction. And it's really nice. And it is the most natural representation of space or spatial data. If I want to see an apartment and I have to go there, I do so because a picture, a two-dimensional picture, does not represent the space very well. If I take a picture from very far down here up to this room will look gigantic, like more gigantic than it is. If I take the picture in a very weird way or with a weird lighting, the room is going to look small, tiny, and crammed. So I can fake or basically not really express the perception of room without being in 3D. And 3D means it would be nice to actually navigate that space in the natural way as well. Also, it means that we can share things. So you could, for instance, hang out with a friend that you can't hang out with. You can share your vacation experiences in a very limited way, but in a very rich way at the same time. Like, photos are nice, videos are nice, but if the person stands basically virtually, stands in the sand and looks around and hears the noise from the sea, that's a very different experience, and that's really a very direct thing. And you can also collaborate together. So we are in architecture. If I can basically walk the building that isn't built yet and see it's too dark, in my opinion, then we can have a conversation about that. From floor plans, which are literally just black lines on white paper, I can't tell that. It needs a lot of experience to spot these problems. So this is really important for me, this sharing and collaboration. Okay, keep that in mind. That's an important one. We're going to come back to that later. So now let's have a look at what VR is in 2016, because actually VR is not a new thing. The first VR device that I know of that is really a VR device that is worth calling or being called a VR device is the Damocles sword from 1962. It looked terrifying. It's like a huge it looks like a doctor's office where the doctor's trying to extract your brain while you are alive. Because it's basically a metal contraption. I didn't have a picture this time, but because I find it frightening. It's a metal contraption that basically has like a gigantic helmet that you're being put on, like with glasses, and it's ridiculous. You can't really walk in that as well. But the landscape today looks slightly different. And if we look at it, then we have basically the Oculus Rift, which is this massively successful Kickstarter, or was this massively successful Kickstarter that was bought by Facebook later on. Then we have the HTC Vive, which is from the Steam people, Valve. Then we have the Gear VR, which is from Samsung. We have the Google Daydream and the Google Cardboard. Now, these are very different, though. So we have the Rift and the Vive have room scale. What does that mean? That means that you actually get to track where in the room you are. So you can literally like walk around a thing. With Oculus, that is pretty limited, but it is still possible. But the Gear VR, the Daydream, and the Cardboard, all being mobile, do not have this capability. Because your phone right now does not know where in the world you are, so it only knows in which direction you're looking. So you can't just make a step forward, and then in virtual reality, you make a step forward. But they are mobile. So with Oculus Rift and HTC Vive, you have to have like a gamer PC, a really high-end PC, and you have to like assemble all the things and have the trackers set up and all that kind of stuff. So it's not really easy to travel with that. I've seen people travel with it. It's hilarious to go through security at the airport. Plan in another hour. If it's in Israel, plan in another day or another week, depending on how you answer questions. And I am being sarcastic and honest, which does not work in Israel. So anyway, so yeah, and those are mobile. That's great. You can travel with them, but they are limited in what they can do. And also the price point is quite different. I mean, the Oculus Rift prices at around $500. The Vive prices around $700. The Gear VR prices at $100. If you have a Samsung phone, you have to have a certain Samsung phones. Daydream, if you have an Android device that is Daydream ready and you have the Daydream itself, it's like 80 euros, I think. And the cardboard is 5 euros and works with every phone except for maybe the Nokia 3310. Anyhow, so that's quite a bit of a range here. And on how do they do in terms of sales, right? So that's the numbers from last year. And here it looks quite interesting. So we have like 500,000-ish sales of HTC Vive. We have, just for comparison, there's also PlayStation VR, which is like a more closed ecosystem than the others. That's around 700,000 units being sold, so 700,000 units in the wild. But then comes the mobile bits. So here we have, the Daydream is relatively new. It's catching up as devices become available and it spreads. But the Gear VR has by far outsold them all, even if you combine them, because we are there like 2.2 million devices, and that's last year alone. And there's one missing, though, and that's because it absolutely skews everything, and that's the cardboard. At a whopping 82 million or 88 million devices. New York Times gave them out for free to their paying subscribers, for instance. So that's quite a few, I would say. So that means that we have a variety of capabilities, because also like the Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive have like 2 hand controllers, and the mobile ones at best have 1 controller, if any. The cardboard just has 1 button. Older versions of the cardboard have no button. They have a magnetic button that works with like 5 phones in the world. It doesn't have a button. And what surprised me, to be honest, mobile VR outsells them all, like all the others by far, which I thought weird, because I thought VR is a thing that you consume in a sort of like either seated or in a home kind of situation. Maybe you even do. That's the learning from me. I actually consume it on my couch, and I don't want to really have to. I'm a couch potato. I mean, that's what it is about, right? So I can't be bothered to actually get up and walk over to where the PC is and, fuck it, I just use the, whatever. And yeah, the cardboard, I mean, that's the status quo. That's the default if you have to work with. So basically, you have to assume that the user that is taking VR into account or using your product with VR is using it on a low-end VR device with basically no real VR capabilities, and then you have to kind of enhance for that if you want a nice experience for those people who actually took some money in their hands and actually built a thing. So how does VR actually work? Let's have a look at this object here. What happens in physical reality is that one eye sees it slightly offset to one side, and the other eye sees it slightly offset to the other side. Which means if I color them in, we see 2 differently colored versions, not quite at the same position. And you can actually check that out. Fix one of the, let's say you look at, look at something on the slide and cover one of your eyes and then do it with the other eye. And it jumps a bit. One of the eyes will not jump, the other one will jump a bit. And if you're not having that, then you should see an optician. But besides that, our brain does the magic. So the actual hard work happens in our brains. So the brain goes, it's that far away and it's there. And then we only see one version of it. That's how VR works, really. So what we're doing is we produce 2 pictures. Instead of having an actual physical object, we produce 2 pictures that are slightly offset. And we can do that by using 2 cameras. If you're thinking of how to make a movie, you just have 2 cameras. And then everything, if you combine the pictures, they are slightly offset, right? And then the brain automatically goes, ooh, I know what this is, what's going on here. I'm going to produce an image and the impression that it is far away. And that's how 3D works, really. And that's also how the glasses in the cinema work as well. Okay, cool. Now we know how to do it, technically speaking, if we have 3D content, but which platform do we pick? Do we go for native, or do we use like Unity? You can actually also do that. That's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Do you go like React VR, maybe, whatever? I think it doesn't matter that much, but I think it should be the web. Because if you remember, I said it's about sharing and experiencing and collaborating. Now, what's the platform that everyone has? Let's do a little trick here. Who here has an Apple device, like an iPhone or a MacBook or a Mac Pro Who here has a Windows computer or a Windows phone? Just kidding. Windows computer. Who here has Linux? Who here has Android? Right, that's like more or less 50-50 split, and depends on where you split. Who here has a browser? People who are not raising their hands should really reconsider this event. But that's fine, that's okay. So yeah, I think it's the best platform to collaborate and share because everyone has a browser. Even the fucking fridges have browsers now. And that's cool because that means that I send a URL of some sort, an address on the web. You tap on it, you click on it, you, I don't know, kick it, whatever you do with old Windows computers. And then you get an experience, whatever that experience might be. If it's an Internet Explorer 5, then you can serve an image and then say to the user, like, well, that's what your Internet Explorer 5 does to you. And if you have a more recent browser, then you get a 3D version of it. And if you have a VR device or if you're on a phone, you have the possibility to switch into VR and experience it in VR. It really well enhances through the entire spectrum. It's really, really cool. And I think that's the thing that we need to make VR actually successful. So let's, blah, 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 let's try it out. I start with a very complicated setup. No build tools involved, because I'm hardcore. That's really hard to read on this projector. It doesn't really matter what kind of scripts are up there. The point being is there's an H1, there's a weird tag called ascene, and I'm loading a few libraries. Okay, great. Now let's create a new tab, and let's go to localhost 8000 to see our amazing, complicated, single-page web app. So this is probably the best web app, and I think it even serves on like really slow 2G. It probably serves in a second or under a second without service worker, but you could totally add a service worker. We're having a talk on that later. But anyway, so yeah, this is a really amazing website, and I am proud of it. It's also the most boring demo I've ever done. Yeah, I think that's the most boring demo I've ever done. But let's spice it up a bit. So how about we add a box and make it red, because Angular is red. And now I position it somewhere in space, so it's a three-dimensional space. So what I'm doing here now is I have three numbers. The first one is the x-axis, and now there comes the enactment part, the x-axis, right? Then we have the y-axis, which is up and down. And then we have the z-axis, which is into the screen, negative, or out of the screen, positive. Okay, so here, and you can assume that these are meters, because everyone uses these. The units don't really mean a thing, but you can make them scale to whatever you want. I call them meters. Or, I don't know, feet, if you're weird. And that's okay. Oh, this is really, really hard to read. Oh my god. I'm not sure why, though, because, okay, whatever. It has a problem with red. This is color, this is position, it's red, ta-da. And if I now go over here, oh, look at that. We have, what the hell is going on with this projector? It's bright, I swear to God, it's bright red on mine. This is hilarious. Let me try a thing real quick. Let's try a different theme, if only I know how to fucking switch things. Default dark, probably. Do I get a pick thing? Yes, I do. Okay, is that better? Yes, awesome. Oh, don't be sarcastic. Anyhow, point taken. Let's try blue. How's the... It's bright cyan. It's amazing. Okay, we do something that this projector supports, which is black. Ah, it's a monochrome projector. Right. No. Shush. This is not the exciting bit. The exciting bit comes when I say Control-Alt-I, and I get a free 3D editor from A-Frame. Ta-da! And you can't really see it because it's black. Surprise! But let me pick a different color. Maybe accidentally the projector thinks, hey, how about I change the freaking bright black? That sounds like a plan. You see it here. Like I can do white. We have established monochrome works. Oh, now I can do red. Oh, whatever. Maybe it only has so much color. Maybe there's a little imp in the projector that actually has to color watercolor in, and I ran out of green. Oh, that's okay. We can deal. Don't worry, little imp. I have your back. So what I can do then is I can move things around like this, and then I reload, and voila, it's on a wow, okay. Whatever, projector, I have your back. I just don't die. Thanks. Anyhow, so I can move it around, great. I can also rotate it, ta-da, and maybe ta-da, and then I can change its size. I can make it like this, and then I can just go back, and voila, I have it like that. Great. That's medium exciting, I think. Right? Maybe half exciting. But there's a bunch of things that this wonderful framework, or it's actually not a framework, this library comes with. For instance, sky. And they're like, what? And let's see, projector. Hit it. Oh, it's white, it's amazing. Okay, no problem. What I can also do is I can use images. So I have a photosphere, which is basically a panorama, but also taken like up and down. So you have an entire sphere surrounding the camera. And let's pick this one, for instance. And if I reload now, I have a floating black box on a mountaintop, because I'm Swiss. There we go. Cool. Hurrah. I am on a mountaintop. There's also a button that is barely seen because it's cut off here, but it's a VR button. If I would have a VR device, it would go into actual VR mode. If I press it now, because it's basically progressively enhancing itself, it at least does full screen. Hurrah. And you have seen, I have not done anything, but I can use my keys, my WASD for the gamers, the arrow keys for the normal people. And I can move around and I can have a good time. Amazing. So that's pretty cool. But it's still pretty boring, I would say, because it's like a box, right? So let's take our little helper and maybe switch the geometry as well, because it's not only boxes, right? We can also have, we can have a geometry lesson here. A sphere, for instance. So now we have a sphere. That means it's a pretty boring ball, and I can transform it like that as well. Oh, that looks weird. Maybe I actually just set it here to like 5 by 5 by 5 times as much, so that I have an actual sphere again. And then you can do like all sorts of weird things. There should be, where is it? Yes, there is what I call the pile of poo of 3D. It's a torus knot. It has no actual practical application except for these kind of demos, where you're doing it, or you could also say a pretzel if you wanted. But I find pile of, like, if you turn it around, it looks weirder and whatever. So we can do that. That's pretty cool. That's pretty fun. But it's still pretty boring because it's just like a bunch of predefined geometries. Except if you know someone who can do 3D modeling, or you do it yourself, which means if you know someone who can do 3D modeling, because the learning curve is steep, maybe it's like trying to go from jQuery to Angular 4 in half an hour. That's how Blender felt. And basically, I opened Blender, which is an amazing, great open source program, but you can do everything with it. So that means you open it and you're like, what world is this? And after like a day, I had a feeling I know the editor, and then a friend of mine helped me with something, and she dragged one menu, and then more windows popped up. I'm like, what is this world? I started questioning my own possibility. But I modeled a rubber ducky, and it only took me a day. I stick to programming, I think. Anyway, you can also like create 3D models in other tools or convert them in between other formats. And there's also like a bunch of platforms where 3D artists put their models up. You can buy them or get them for free. Some of them are for free. And then I can say, you know what, I want that in my thingy here. And then you specify that you have an asset item. I give it a name. I call it building. And I give it a source. I think it's a source. I hope it's a source. If it's not a source, then I'm like, ugh. Model, and I think it's called export GLTF. GLTF is a format, is a 3D format. It's just a file format like JPEG is. It's basically, GLTF is basically JPEG for 3D on the web, if you wish. Okay, cool. Or like WebP for the web, whatever. No, you know what I mean. Fuck it. And what we can then do is we can say, I have an entity, and I want this to be a GLTF model, referencing building. And if the demo gods are with me today, which they usually aren't, oh, look at that. I have imported an entire freaking building. And I can walk around, and I can walk over water because I'm Jesus. And here we go, and then I can look into the abyss, and oh my god, this looks terrible because there's like a gigantic abyss, and I'm gonna die. Also, by the way, if you're going into the in the inspector, you also get the entire tooling for the models here as well, right? So it's not a special thing that only works with the simple boxes or something. You can also do it like with these things. It absolutely works as well. Sweet. So, whoops, okay. Wrong, right. So we can do that, but it's pretty weird because we are floating somewhere and it looks like it doesn't look good. And this model is also called the Stahlhaus. It was done by a colleague of mine called Madeleine Kalunda. She's amazing. I don't know, is this recorded? If this is recorded, I think we should give a round of applause to Madeleine because this model is amazing. I also added a library called A-Frame Extras, and you get things like the A-Ocean. And you can do that, and ooh, look at that. We have, oh, that's going to be fun. That's going to be fun. Are we getting an ocean? I don't know. Oh, yes, we did, and it's actually flooding our building. Well, I guess that's global warming for us. Screw you, Trump. No, seriously, screw them. Anyway. So I'm going to revert global warming a bit and move it down by 1. And voila, we're having an ocean that ends before the model ends. Ha, ha, ha. Crap. Maybe we make it larger, maybe 500 meters by 500 meters, so that we actually see the ocean when we're standing here. Yeah, that looks better. What happens when I do not specify a color, because I'm really bad with colors? Like, basically, when you ask me, do you like this color? And I say, yes, choose another color. That's the lesson here, really. And here we have it. We have our ocean, and you can see that it, like, flaps at our building like that. It's kind of nice, isn't it? So yeah, you can build these kind of things. That's really cool. And now I'm going to do a tour de force of the rest of my presentation. So, it's going to be fun. I love this kind of stuff, and I thought I spent more time because it's worth it. So you can build these things, and it didn't really take that long. And you see that you have HTML with attributes, so you can totally contribute these or control these attributes from an Angular application. There's no problem, or React application, whatever, right? Cool. VR then looks like this, just to give you a picture. So it is distorted because there's lenses in the headsets, and they distort things, so you have to undistort them, which then looks distorted to the normal naked eye. You have one picture for the left eye, one picture for the right eye. You might see a resemblance in the 3D model, maybe, just total coincidence. And it's really cool because what you can do with it is you can build these applications really quick and try out and prototype, and it works pretty much everywhere. And that's because WebVR is pretty much available on every device and platform, as long as it has a browser. That is more or less recent. Most browsers support it in some way, so Chrome for Android has it if you have the Google VR thingy installed and your phone is ready for it, or you set a flag, and there's like a nightly build for Windows, and I think for Linux and macOS as well. Firefox has it now. I think it's still behind the flag, I'm not sure. Firefox Nightly definitely has it without a flag. Edge is getting it, including HoloLens, which is fucking amazing. And then there's Samsung Internet. That's a more or less unknown browser-ish compared to the others, probably, but it's pretty important because it's the browser for the Gear VR. The one next to it is Facebook's Carmel. That's a VR browser that you can, like, it has a VR interface, which is kind of cool. And Servo, which is this experimental browser engine from Mozilla, also is getting it. So it's pretty cool. It's there. It's not gonna, it's not a thing that one vendor pushes and no one else. Yesterday, Apple announced they are joining the WebVR group as well, which is amazing. Welcome, Apple. Good morning. And no, but it's cool. I'm really happy that they're joining. And it's an open standard developed by the W3C. You can go to the W3C WebVR standard group, talk to people, like I don't understand this, or how does this work? Feedback is really, really valuable. Please go there, read through the specs. They're not too complicated, and then just give feedback if you have a problem with it. There's a bunch of tooling and a strong community. A-Frame basically more or less does monthly releases, and they have a really strong community. They have a great Slack. If you go there and ask questions, there's always someone helping you, which is really cool. And it is just so much easier to create and share, because if you use, for instance, Unity, you have to like compile it, then you have to get it on the device, then you have to try out on the device, and you're like, and then you go back. And most of the problems are not necessarily VR problems, but 3D problems, and you can fix or find these without having to go to the real device immediately if you're doing like web iterations. And also there's literally just like code, save, and then the person reloads. That's it. That's a really, really nice cycle. But there's a bunch of challenges that I'm going to really quickly run through. One of them is input. So you would think that hands are great, but in VR, they might not be so great. And because the problem is these figurines are like, it requires tactile feedback. You have none, and that's like super weird. So it's maybe not the best idea. Also, the cardboard does not have any hand tracking, and the cardboard is pretty prevalent, so we have to deal with it. And how you deal with it is by using gaze controls, for instance. So if the gaze rests at a certain point and there's an action associated to wherever you're looking at, like there's a button and then you hover over it, then you show a little like a dial, and you go like 3, 2, 1, and then you trigger the action. That's one way of dealing with it. And that also like enhances really well, because if I have a device like this, for instance, I can point at things and immediately click, which is like the next iteration, and then you have like hand controllers, you can do the same. It's quite nice, actually. So you have gaze input, you have gamepad and VR controllers. Depending on if they are available, you have to check. There's also, for the hands, what you saw, the demo was leap motion. That's a tiny device that does not work with mobile as far as I'm aware, that tracks your hands. There's a Myo, is a bracelet that measures your muscle electricity. It's also pretty cool. You can use both of them and then feel like Minority Report. There's the Kinect and RealSense. You can theoretically use that and hook that up so that you track where in the room you are, but I've not got that to work. If you have a demo that works like that, I would be interested in knowing about it. Then there's like motion. How do you move around for longer spaces? I can't move 10 meters. How do I get to 10 meters? This is an interesting proposal. And now comes my favorite part. Woof, and then you're there. How does that work with cardboard, though? I don't know, and it's also not very precise, so not sure. Presence is another thing. You have to create an impression of presence, and here this is all fake. Like, the hands are not tracked. They're just assuming the person looks in the direction where the action is, or the goal is supposed to be, and the thing is coming closer to the goal, so they are assuming, it's a Google I/O, the Google VR experiment, they're assuming that the player would act like this. Also, the eyes, they are also not tracked. It's also fake. It's googly eyes that just turn in the direction, like the pupils turn in the direction of the movement of the head. But it really looks like there's an actual person cheering, in my opinion. I mean, I don't know that many people that exactly look like that, but they would be fine. I mean, all for inclusion. Final, last famous words. Steve Jobs once said, "The computer is an amazing tool because it is the bicycle for our minds. It makes us so much more effective in using our brain capacity and even our physical abilities. So it's an amazing tool, really." And I think VR is also an amazing tool because it's the teleporter for our minds. It gives us the impression of being somewhere where we can't be, or doing something that we can't do for whatever physical, psychological, or other reason, monetary reason, because capitalism sucks. So yeah, this is kind of what I want you to take away from it, that you should totally play around with it and totally try it out. And with that, I shut the hell up. Thank you very much.